Welcome everyone to Facebook Gaming's seminar on burnout. So this is an awesome event that Facebook Gaming is putting on to help content creators as well as the audience better understand a little bit about burnout as part of our initiative in October, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. Today, we're going to be having a conversation with two awesome Facebook creators. We've got Television, who is an awesome variety and FPS streamer, also a part of Facebook's Black Creator Program. And we also have with us Darkness 429, who's also an awesome FPS streamer and variety streamer. Everyone's playing a touch of New World nowadays.
Can't help
so
it.
Welcome Darkness and welcome Tel. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about your experience of being a creator and a little bit about your experience of burnout.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us, Alok.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So let's just start with this. Can y'all tell us a little bit, whoever wants to go first, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into streaming?
Tel, would you like to go first?
Sure. I was recommended to streaming because I experienced a lot of social anxiety. So my friends were like, just go for it. This will really help you. And I've been here for 2 years.
Wow, that's interesting. So you got into streaming due to having social anxiety?
To help with it.
Wow. Okay.
I am really shy in person. And
so what's it like to stream in front of like hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of people with social anxiety?
Crazy. It's crazy. Sometimes I have to listen to some music before I go live to just, calm my nerves.
Yeah, I can imagine it may be a little bit challenging, but it sounds like it's a really interesting way to tackle a problem. Mm-hmm. Darkness or Tim? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying it works.
Nice. Tim or Darkness, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into streaming?
Yeah, sure. So I've been streaming a little bit longer than 2 years. I started streaming back in college in probably like 2011, 2012. It's when Twitch wasn't even a thing. It's when it was still Justin TV. And I was doing it kind of just like as a way to pass the time when I didn't have classes. Or I didn't have any homework or there was nothing to do. And then my wife and I left the University of Florida and we moved for her work. And so I found myself really depressed, really lonely. And I remember the time that I had on stream and I was like, man, that was so much fun. I was talking to people. I was having a good time. I didn't take it seriously. I was just doing it just for fun. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm playing video games anyways. I like to talk. Let's just turn a stream on. And long story short, that's how I started, is because I was going through a really dark time in my life. And streaming actually helped pull me out of it.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think there's been a lot of research recently about kind of the negative impacts of gaming on mental health or social media and stuff like that. I think one of the things that's often overlooked is that, especially during the pandemic, like gaming, streaming is a great way to like actually stay connected to a community. Mm-hmm. And it's actually been protective. I think one of the things I've noticed as a psychiatrist is that it can actually help people like stay connected and buffer against loneliness and things like that. So it's really interesting to hear that both of y'all have actually had, some kind of social anxiety or kind of being in a dark place, and that streaming has actually helped you with those.
Yeah. And I'm glad we're going to talk about burnout though, because you mentioned the pandemic. And for me personally, by the time we were done, when we got over the hump of like that prime time when everyone was locked in around the summer, I was so tired. It was like because we were online all the time. And I think we kind of like, as streamers, we kind of took on some of the emotional baggage from viewers. And they're like, I've got nothing else to do. Like, oh, my friend has COVID, like all this stuff. And like, it was a lot. Last year sucked.
Yeah, absolutely. How was last year for you, Tel?
It was the same, COVID, a lot of death, just people that I've kept up with for years sadly lost their life to COVID, and it was really rough. Yeah. Yeah,
that's so interesting. So can y'all share a little bit about what was it like to be a streamer during COVID?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, for me personally, I felt like I owed it to my community to be online. I remember saying to my wife, I was like, well, if they're going to be stuck in the house with nothing to do, like I should be there to entertain them. Like they're looking for something. Like, let me give them that positive outlet that they're all looking for. And so I kind of like took that responsibility onto myself to be the viewer's sanctuary, to be that outlet for them. And at the time, it was a little self-serving as well. Everybody was home, so numbers were up and things looked good. So it was kind of like it was a good time to grow because everyone was home. And then I also felt like it was owed because everyone was going through a really rough time.
Yeah.
And so, and I've learned through therapy recently that that's really a bad thing, is to take ownership of other people's feelings and emotions. I've learned that I have some issues that I need to work through. But yeah, like, so that was a big part of it, was taking that on, and it was a lot.
Yeah. So Tim, I think you may be map hacking a little bit because you anticipated my next question.
Oh, I apologize.
You already answered it.
Yeah. I've learned recently that I deal with cognitive dissonance and some other things. So
interesting. Tell, what was it like for you to stream during the pandemic?
It was a little rough for me. It was a little rough because I had my own things going on, and then people would come in and say what they were going through, and I would feel it. I empathize a lot with others. So I feel it a lot when other people are going through things. So yeah, it was a bit rough.
Yeah, so I'm kind of noticing a theme here, which is that, Tal, you and Tim are both streaming, right? But then there's actually like some kind of relationship or connection to your viewers.
Yeah.
So on Tim's end, it feels a little bit like responsibility, like no one has anything to do. And so, at least like if I get on and stream, like I can help people, like maybe be a little bit entertained or maybe forget a little bit about the pandemic. Everyone's kind of quarantined and stuck at home. And on the flip side, Tal, what I'm hearing from you is that you were kind of going through some stuff. Maybe people around you were getting sick, and that's obviously happening with your viewers too.
Yeah.
And so as you kind of listen to them, as you talk to them, they're sharing some of their troubles with you, and it's kind of like affecting you.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds, how do y'all navigate sort of the relationship between either, having responsibility or kind of empathizing or connecting too much with your viewers? How do you handle that?
I personally journal. I need to write it out to kind of like get it out my head and just see it, kind of like reflect on it that way. So I journal a lot.
And so what does journaling kind of do for you?
It's like talking to someone, but they don't speak back. You can just tell them whatever, and it's just out there, but it's kind of like personal to you.
Yeah, so I'm kind of hearing that maybe you have a lot of stuff floating around inside, and when you journal, it kind of comes out, so you're not like holding it in anymore.
Yes. Yep.
And Tim, so I'm kind of curious, are there particular things that you found? You mentioned, I think that you did a little bit of therapy at some point. So I'm wondering how do you manage some of the feelings that you have of responsibility and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, like I just started actively seeing a therapist again, like a month and a half ago, almost 2 months. So during the pandemic, I didn't do anything. So I internalized it all. I took it on, and I reached a point this year where I was just like, I can't. I need to go talk to somebody, because I used to see a therapist when I was in college. Who this individual saved my life. Like I probably would have actually ended up killing myself if it wasn't for that person. Can't remember his name. Can't remember his face. I know he existed. I sat in his office. I just can't remember. But yeah, if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here. And so I got to a point where it was just like, I felt very lost. And so I went and saw a therapist again. And so for me now, it's understanding that those, like, yes, I can sympathize, but I don't have to internalize. I don't have to take on their feelings. And like, that's been a really hard thing for me, is learning that it's theirs, it's not mine. And I have to deal with what's mine, and I can't let them deal with my stuff. And so it's just like ownership has really been the biggest thing for me. And also meditation has really been helping a lot. That has been like probably the best way for me to just get those thoughts out.
Wow. Yeah. So I think you guys are touching on a couple of, really important points that people will kind of toss around, right? So people will talk about journaling or introspection. People will talk about meditation. They'll talk about therapy. So I'm kind of curious, both of y'all have sort of talked a little bit about taking things on or potentially holding things in. Can y'all help our viewers understand, like, what's an example of something that you would take in from someone else? Anything come to mind?
I have a great example.
Go for it.
Let's hear it, bro.
So when I first started streaming here on Facebook, got really popular playing Fortnite, and I got to a burnout point. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I'm tired. And I cold turkeyed. I was just like, nope, today's the day. I'm done. I'm not turning it on. And so I went through a point in my career where I didn't play the game that people found me on. Just like I've done multiple times. This is unheard of for me, is where I get to a point to a game and I'm just like, nope, I'm effing done with this. Turn it off. And so I got to that point with Fortnite and I was done. And a dad sent me an email, a very, very long email. And people, if you've watched me, you know the story. This dad sends me an email and he says, long story short, now that you stopped playing Fortnite, I cannot connect with my son anymore. Your stream was the only point of connection that I had with my son was you and playing this one game. And so like that was probably the best example I can give of internalizing that person's emotions, because I didn't stream for 3 days. I completely turned off the stream. There was one point I didn't get out of bed. I stayed in bed all day. Like I felt like the scum of the earth. Like my dad hasn't been on this earth for 11 years. He passed away. And so like I felt regret because I was like, oh my God, I completely just ruined this one thing that I don't have. My dad's not here. And so I took this away from this kid, and so, yeah, that's probably the best example I can give of me internalizing something from a viewer and just feeling just terrible about it.
And Tel, I'm kind of curious. You mentioned that your viewers also kind of affect you a lot with what's going on in their lives.
Yeah.
Does anything in particular pop up for you in terms of that?
Anything related to death kind of just puts me in this little bubble that I can't get out of. Honestly, if I'm going to be honest, I haven't streamed for the past 2 days. Most of my community knows, but my mom was recently diagnosed with hypertension stage 3. And it has me this bubble again.
Yeah.
So working out of that is a little rough.
I can imagine. Is it okay if I ask you like 1 or 2 questions about what your experience over the last couple of days has been like?
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of noticing that y'all have, streaming is sort of like a job. It's a responsibility. You have viewers. It sounds like your viewers are actually really supportive, which is awesome. It sounds like your viewers, unlike Tim, are not placing the responsibility of having a connection with their child on your shoulders, right? Which is really bizarre. And we're not going to dig into that because it's like,
it's really deep.
Bro, if the only way you're connecting with your kid is to watch a Fortnite stream, I don't think that's on the streamer.
No,
right?
There's some problems there at home, dude.
Maybe a little bit on you, right?
Yeah.
Like as a parent. But anyway, we're not going to go there. But I'm kind of curious, Tel, so how do you manage kind of the struggle of wanting to stream, wanting to grow, wanting to be there with your viewers with sort of your own personal needs?
It's not easy. It's kind of like so for example, I play Warzone and I have a lot of my community added on Warzone. Sometimes people will be like, hey, I see you on the game, but why aren't you streaming? And I got to kind of be like, I'm not feeling it right now. So I'm actually in the game right now, New World. I've been on it for like 4 days straight, honestly. And it's kept me really calm and my mind is positive.
Wow. So can you help me understand a little bit about, when you are going through a rough time, what does a game kind of do for you? How does it help you stay positive?
It helps me like shy away the negative thoughts. It kind of like puts me in a zone where I can just play the game without any outside, what's the word? Infiltration,
stressors?
maybe stressors.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say infiltration, but yeah.
Oh, that's a much better word. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go for it.
I was gonna say sometimes I feel like I have to answer to all of it with a set answer, and I can't just be like, I'm not feeling it. Sometimes I feel like I have to have a compound answer.
A compound answer to what question?
Why aren't you streaming?
Got it. Yeah. So what I'm almost noticing there is that even if you are okay with the responsibility of not streaming, like you're okay saying, hey, I'm not in a good mood to stream, there's oddly enough, even an additional stress, which is that you have to justify it.
Yes.
There's a feeling that you have to justify it to your viewers, that you need a good reason to excuse your behavior.
Yeah.
What's it like to deal with? Yeah. So how do you kind of deal with that pressure of like, the first thing is like stopping the stream, like that's hard enough.
Yeah.
And then like even beyond that, like explaining it to everyone is like an additional layer of stress. Like, how do you deal with that?
Sometimes I just can't. I can't. I probably won't like even turn on. So I have two PCs, and sometimes I won't turn on the stream PC because that just says I'm not streaming today, and I'll just game.
Wow. What about you, Tim? How do you kind of manage some of the stuff around setting limits around gaming, or how do you communicate with or what's it like to communicate with your viewers when you decide that you need a break?
Yeah, it's hard. I think it has come down to just conditioning the viewers, because originally it wasn't like that. It was definitely like apologizing to people for inconveniencing them for taking time off. Like, hey guys, sorry something came up, or hey, sorry, whatever, like constantly apologizing for that thing. And I was just like, well, like it's free content. They're not paying for it. We're putting up this content for their enjoyment. Yes. But at the same time, like we're also people. And so like, that's like, for me personally, it's just been like over the years, like conditioning, like, hey, this is my time off. My wife and I had a son 2 years ago. And so people know that like I used to stream on the weekends and now I don't, because I stream from 9 to 5, and then I've got my other responsibilities for everything else, and then it's family time. So like people know that like, oh, Tim's got family time, or like this is going on. So like before, it definitely there was no work-life balance at all. There was like constantly feeling like I owed it to them. I felt guilty taking time off. I never took a vacation. It was on all the time. And then now, as of late, now probably the last year, I've been trying really hard to be like, hey, hey, I'm taking some time off. I need to take a time. I need to take a day off. I need this.
Yeah, there's an interesting kind of subtle advantage there, which is I wonder if y'all are actually like modeling really good behavior to your viewers. It's one thing to kind of set boundaries, but also like letting people know that, hey, like it's actually okay to have a life, right?
Yeah.
That streaming and gaming is wonderful. It can be a lot of fun as long as we kind of set kind of healthy limits or healthy boundaries around it.
I
So that's
think
kind of, yeah, go ahead.
All of your point though is saying like healthy limits and boundaries is that the streamers as a whole don't have that. Like as we are as a culture, like a streamer culture, like you have the people who are grinding for 24 hours, 48 hours, doing subathons, staying online for weeks on end. Like they're building they're setting the bar so high that the normal person is being held to an expectation that is unreal. And I've noticed that more and more, is that like people forget that streamers are people. They forget that we are human beings just like you. Like if you get to take the weekend off because your job allows it, why can't my job allow me to take a day off or a weekend off or have a holiday? Like, why can't I take a vacation?
Yeah, so let's dig into that. Okay.
Yeah.
So like let's think about this for a second. Like, why not? Right. So instead of asking the question rhetorically and kind of thinking, oh, like everyone should be able to, all of y'all have felt it, right? Because y'all have both gotten to a point where you have to like force yourself to take a break, or you can't take it anymore. You push yourself to the breaking point. What makes the culture the way that it is? What goes through your head on the 18th hour of streaming, as you go into hour 19, as you go into hour 20, as you go into hour 26? What is in your head that is keeping you from taking a break, from building that work-life balance?
You want to go, Tim?
Yeah. From like when I was in my grind mentality and a young buck, it was someone else is going to be on after me. Someone else can do it better. Someone can do it faster. Someone is better in any way, shape, or form. So why give them the opportunity? Like that's really what it was. It was clout. It was the pride. It was, why do I want to give this? Like, why do I want to give someone else the opportunity to have something that's mine? And that's truly like that's where I was mentally when I wasn't taking time off, is because I wanted it all, right? Just like everybody else, you want to work for that thing. You don't know what you're working for. Like it really, when you're in it and you're grinding and you're streaming, it's like, well, what are you doing it for? Like, what's the point? And at that point, there is no point. You're just doing it because you're caught in the motions.
What about you, Tel? What drives you to the point of like exhaustion?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have an answer yet, because I kind of like, I know my limits. I know my limits when it comes to it. So for me, it's like, how do I communicate that in a stream if I'm feeling that exhaustion? How do I say, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna end the stream and probably come back next time. For me, I kind of like I don't I don't necessarily worry about what other people have going on. I kind of focus on, what do you have going and how are you going to make this better? Or how can you be better? So I kind of have those thoughts in my head when it comes to the grind, just like how can I improve?
I can say now as someone who's like has bills and like has a family and like a lot of responsibilities, like now I'm doing this because it's my job. Like those are now the fears of like, man, I hope I can making sure I can pay my bills and making sure like life is taken care of now. I definitely noticed that my like priorities and stuff have changed as I've gotten older.
Yeah, so I'm kind of noticing that there are a lot of different factors here, right? So one is, I think a lot of times when people look at streamers, they think like, this is the life. Like, I like playing games, right? So even Tell is kind of sharing with us that when she's taking a break, there's actually, so there's good neuroscience evidence, for example, that the amygdala and the limbic system, which are the parts of our brain that sort of experience negative emotion, that when we play video games, those parts of our brain actually get unplugged. So if we're actually going through a tough time, games can actually be a really important coping mechanism. There's a tricky balance there because any coping mechanism when used to excess, whether it's playing a video game or, even going camping, can be problematic if it sort of causes you to like escape from life in a kind of maladaptive way. But I'm kind of noticing that they're like, when people look at you, they say like, oh my God, because when we play games, like when I play games, like it's easy, right? I play it and it's pretty much fun every time I play it. I enjoy it. And people will look at you and they'll look at you and they'll be like, oh, wow, that's the life, right? It's like streaming and playing games and getting paid. Like how awesome. But what I'm really noticing as I hear you guys is that there's actually like a lot of different things that weigh you down, right? There's the idea of comparison. There's the idea that if you don't grind, someone else will, right? There's only a limited number of viewers out there. And if you're not streaming hour after hour after hour, someone else who is willing to make that sacrifice is going to grow faster.
Yep.
And there's like, this is an industry where if you're not growing, you're dying, right? There's
Yep.
that kind of mentality. So it's all about growth. It's never enough. Like you can never satisfy the beast.
Yeah.
And on top of that, since y'all have made the transition to actually being a streamer, now there's also like, it's not just about growing or dying. There's actually like financial like burdens on you, right? Because like, what's going to happen? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And so how do y'all deal with like all of that pressure? Like, how do you manage that kind of stuff?
Dude, when you list it out like that, like I just want to recoil up because it's like you just said my day to day and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's me. I can't believe I do that.
Yep. So now we're going to talk about burnout, right? So people are wondering, where does burnout come from and how is it like think about like how ideal your life is, right? From a viewer's perspective, because here's the thing, if you're a viewer, you can go to the bathroom, you can go eat, you can go on vacation. Yeah. And then the stream is still going on in the background. Like they can choose when to engage or not to engage. But as a streamer, y'all have so many burdens, right? It's about growing. It's about metrics. It's about playing what's cool. It's about maybe like playing something. If y'all both seem to be like really solid FPS streamers. So maybe like, New World is going to be a little bit trickier for you. And maybe you're not performing quite as well. And like you have all these kinds of doubts in your head, right?
Yep.
And so I'm kind of curious about, what builds up. So I'm kind of noticing that both of y'all have sometimes taken breaks. I was hoping maybe you could start tell like how have you felt over the last couple of weeks? What's kind of built up within you that's kind of forced you to sort of recognize your limits?
My anxiety is on 1,000 and I don't know how to bring it down.
Can you,
that's the only thing that's holding me back. It's my anxiety. I found myself camera shy, which is so weird because, I've been at it for 2 years, going on 3. I've been in front of the camera for a lot of time. And to feel camera shy now, it has me wondering like what's going on.
So I'm going to ask kind of Tim a weird question. When you look at Tim, does she look anxious?
No, you look calm as heck.
Yeah, right. So
Like
like that's
really
Very
calm.
well. I hide it
yeah,
really
right.
well.
You have a really good game face because I look like you were just ready to just slay out.
You look super zen. Like
Yeah.
and I have a really good game face is like the hallmark of a true streamer,
Yeah.
right? So like what's it like to put on your face when you go onto the internet?
Sometimes I can't do it. Sometimes I can't do it. I have to do certain things. Like even before this live right now, I listen to some music. My favorite song is High Hopes by Panic at the Disco, and I will play that on repeat because I resonate with it so much. Um, and maybe it's watching a show, or maybe it's taking a quick walk before the stream or going live. I need to do those things to kind of keep going.
Wow. And tell, you're welcome to just tell me if you're not comfortable answering any question, but I'm curious
Yeah.
what makes your anxiety feel so overwhelming right now?
Right now it's mostly my mom. It's my mom. It's been me and my mom for a year straight. I was raised by her, and we just did everything together. Um, and now kind of like the thought of losing her, it has me worried.
Yeah, of course, I can imagine. It makes me think a little bit about, I can see you're kind of getting emotional, so I'm going to take a step back for a second. But I just want to kind of highlight that, like, once again, what the viewers see sometimes, as Tim was saying, is like, they don't see people, right?
No.
They see streamers.
Yeah.
And so what I'm kind of curious about is how do y'all manage, like, here you are, you're playing games, you're kind of putting on a face, you're like, creating content. And I do get the sense that y'all genuinely, really enjoy and appreciate the privilege of being a streamer. How do y'all manage sort of real life versus streaming? Like, how does that work? Like, Tim's got a kid, tells mom, it sounds like things are a little bit scary right now. How do y'all do that?
You gotta know what works for you and what can get you out of those thoughts that kind of drag you down. You gotta kind of find what works for you, maybe not someone else, but what works for you as a person.
Can you tell me a little bit about your journey of discovering what worked for you?
Yeah. So just a little backstory. I was in school 2 years ago. I completed 3 years towards my degree, but I just to let you guys know, I almost took my life, and I reached out to someone, and yeah. A lot of people, they see me and they think I have it all together, but it's not the case. I go through a lot on internally, maybe outside of the stream, and I need to do certain things. So I mentioned journaling, I mentioned taking a walk. In therapy, I learned a lot of that, and what helps Chantel, like what gets Chantel out of bed, what gets Chantel moving, what keeps her going in a day, and those are the things.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to hear, because it's interesting, because when I talk to streamers, what I hear is they think about someone else, right? Like, like Tim was kind of thinking, what does this dude's dad need? He needs me to stream. What do the viewers need? Like, what do other people need? And what I'm kind of noticing is when you're thinking about other people, like when Tim is thinking about other people, he's not thinking about himself.
No.
And so it's so interesting. Even the language that you use, makes me realize that there's actually like intentionality behind you taking care of yourself. In order to take care of yourself, you actually have to like think the way that you would about another person, right? Like, oh, what do I need to do to take care of my mom? What do I need to do to take care of my brother or sister or friend? What do I need to do? Because it's hard. It's like, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's always hard to ask, what do I need to do for myself? It feels so selfish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting. I think it's really insightful to hear just how you think about taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And what does Tell need?
Yeah.
Tim, what about you? How did you figure out kind of what works for you, right? Because you didn't know at the beginning.
Sorry, can you reframe the question again?
Yeah. So like, let's just take a step back and recognize that. So both of y'all have been through a lot. Holy, you guys have been through a lot. And it's so fascinating to hear y'all's perspectives, because what I'm sort of getting the sense of is that y'all have learned a lot. You've kind of coped. You've come a long way. but I'm putting myself in the shoes of a streamer who's just starting out.
Sure.
Right. I'm putting myself in the shoes of even people who are at home and watching, because burnout is actually on the rise globally at an alarming rate. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, like, here we have the two of y'all that have learned so much.
Yeah.
And how can we kind of go back earlier in your journey and ask yourself, how did you learn what you know today? Right. If I'm sitting at home and listening, I need to understand what your journey looked like so that I can kind of map it out and walk it for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that I did to really like take control of my life from a streaming perspective was actually putting my physical health first. So I started going to the gym. That was the one thing that I could control that was mine. And it's my body. Like, my body is the one thing that is mine no matter what. And so I realized that when I'm in the gym, it's my time. It's nobody else's time. And that was so freeing to just have this hour or an hour and a half of, it was just me. It's me in the gym, and I don't have to be a streamer. I don't have to entertain. I don't have to read. I don't have to talk. I'm literally just there and just breathing. And when I started doing that and I started doing it consistently, I started to feel better, because like, it was the one thing. I started actually finding time for myself. I started giving myself time, and then I started to give myself the permission to do things that I wanted to do. And that was the hardest part, was actually giving myself the permission to do something that wasn't expected. So like playing a game that I wanted to play versus playing the game that somebody wanted me to play. That was the big turning point in me not being like the slave to the machine, if you will. I was actually really like being a true content creator. And that's when I really started to be happy, is I was playing the games that I wanted to play. And I don't want to get that, I don't want to get that turned around or skewed or anything. Like, I do play games because they do well for metrics. Like, you do have to have that healthy balance, but either introducing those like once a week, or, having a break for a week and just playing something else. When I started introducing that, that's when I really started to like really enjoy myself again. And I think that was it was just really starting to take control of the things that I have been yearning to do and wanting to do, but I was making excuses why I wasn't going to do it. And so when I stopped making those excuses and just trying it out and seeing what would happen, and knowing that it wouldn't hurt me, it was always the fear, it was the uncertainty that was scary. I was like, man, if I turn on my stream one day and I play something completely different, my entire channel is going to be gone. Everybody's going to leave me. No one's going to love me anymore. No one's going to watch me. They're all going to go away. Well, that's not fair to them. You're not even giving them a chance. And that was unfair to my fan base. That's not, I should have given them the chance. I should have given myself the chance too. So I think that was the biggest thing, is just giving myself the chance.
And I'm kind of noticing this theme that Tim sort of mentioned about giving yourself permission. I'm kind of curious, because you sort of talk about that too, right? You talk about what does Tell need? And how did you get there? Because how were you able to learn how to put yourself first?
Therapy helped me out. I needed to go for years, my mom was saying that I needed to, but finally getting there and learning what I did, it kind of put me in a different mindset to focus on, not to be selfish, but to be mindful of, what you need in a given moment.
All right. So I've got a question for y'all. All right. This is a hard question. So this interview now can go one of two ways. Either we can keep on talking about what did you do about burnout? How did you learn this? Oh, great. Yeah. Oh my God, it's a testament to the human spirit. Oh yeah. Or what I can do is challenge you.
Sure.
Okay. And if I challenge you, the questions are going to be harder, but I think they'll be more helpful. So which way, you guys want to take the easy road or the hard road? And I recognize I'm sort of trapping you here.
What you want to do? I don't know.
What you going to do, Tim?
Oh, I'm going to go I'm a hard-headed guy. I want to go the hard route.
So here it is. All right. So the tough question. Oh, so Tim's I started going to the gym every day, 90 minutes. That's my time. Right. But Tim, bro, if I go to the gym, I'm so out of shape, I'm just going to embarrass myself. I don't belong at the gym.
No.
Right. I'm an out of shape gamer. How do I deal with those thoughts? Like
because
I need to work out for like a month
yeah,
before I can go to the gym and actually like feel like a regular human being.
are we role playing? Because I can just tell you what I tell people all the time.
Sure.
Like, dude,
I'm genuine.
okay, so you are literally making the best decision of your life right now is the wanting to walk in through the door. The hardest part is to open the door and walk through it. Once you're in the gym, everything else is cake. It's easy peasy. You've done the hard part. You walked through. You made the decision that, yeah, I'm going to work out.
All right. So, but that's my problem, right? Is like I don't walk through the door. My problem is that I think about what I'm going to look like when I walk through the door. I think about how everyone who's there is in better shape than I am.
But they don't care about you. You think they care about you. And that's the thing. And that's the hardest part is getting over the fact that you think everyone's thinking about you when they're all thinking about themselves. They want you to think about them. They're not thinking about you. Everybody in that gym is thinking about themselves, thinking that everybody else is looking at them. And that's it. Like that. I mean, you can, and it's the same way with streamers too. I don't know who half the people are who are streaming, you know, but like everybody thinks that we all think about each other thinking about us streaming. Like it's the weirdest thing. You know, you can put it in this world, you can put it in streaming, you can do it in the gym. It's just like once you like realize that it's not about everybody, it's just about you. That's it.
What I'm hearing you say, Tim, is that they are caught up in their own social anxiety and thinking like they're too anxious thinking about themselves to spend any time thinking about me.
Yeah, exactly.
So Tell, you have the harder question, right? Because like going to the gym is just walking through a door. But like there are a ton of people will say like, oh, you should go see a therapist. Or they'll be like, oh yeah, like I've heard, you know, like they're watching this stream and they're sitting there at home and they're like, oh yeah, like therapy helped him and therapy helped Tell. And like, yeah, I should probably do that. But, and it also sounds like you actually had, you know, maybe even for years, I wasn't quite sure that maybe your mom was actually recommending that. And you were kind of huh?
It was my mom. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were sort of like resisting it.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get over that? Like,
so for me, we didn't like growing up. My mom was my therapy, but she didn't know. Like seeing her go through what she went through kind of helped me get through like what I'm going through now and different scenarios that I have to navigate. I learned from her. So I felt like I didn't have to go because I was learning from her. But I was also kind of hurting in other places too. Like I had some trauma that I was dealing with from young, maybe 7, 8 years old. So I needed to get that out to someone that probably wasn't her, and it helped me out. I would say like go for it. You never know what your therapist can help you with. You just never know. It's always fighting the unknown when it comes to that.
So Tell, once again, I'm going to challenge you. Okay. So like, I love that answer because I'm a therapist, but you know, if I'm sitting there at home, I'm thinking like, but that's the whole problem, right? Like, what if I'm not good at it? What if it doesn't help me? What if, you know, it's a waste of my time? Like, and even like, what if I'm so messed up that therapy can't help?
Wow. Oh man, I had that question too for myself.
I think the best way to answer that is, yeah, I got you. I think the best way to answer that is that we're all broken. Like, and I say this all the time, we're all broken, and it's all about accepting the fact that we're all broken and we all have to work on ourselves. And I think once you accept that and come to that even playing ground that we're all in some bad stuff, and we all need to work through it, and we all have different ways of working through it. I think that's the best way to put it.
So I love what y'all did there. I don't know if you guys even recognize this. So Tim has the answer, right? He's like, oh, we're all broken. It's a good answer. And then Tell was like, I know what that feels like. And the beautiful thing is that those two answers work so well together. Because sometimes actually motivating people to go to therapy is not about having the right answer. It's about someone being able to say, I don't have an answer like Tim. But when Tell simply says like, I don't know, right? But I felt that way and it did help. And so like, I think it's sort of interesting because I think Tim is sort of sharing with us like the idea behind it, the mechanism, the principle that he's learned. And what I'm getting from Tell is actually more of the raw emotion of like feeling like you're so messed up that nothing can help you. And so and so I, you know, when people are listening there at, you know, at home or other content creators, like I want y'all to really like pay attention to like both sides of this coin, because it doesn't have to make sense in your head. I want y'all to like, it's a beautiful theory, Tim, but recognize that Tell just sort of felt the same way and she like went for it.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like it helped a lot. Both of y'all went for it at some time. And I didn't realize that both of y'all had been, you know, suicidal at some point. Cause that's, you know,
it's a scary feeling, dude. Like when I told my wife to put my gun away, I was like, hey, like you should probably put this away. Like that was a scary point in life, and that scared the crap out of me. And that was the moment where I was like, I think I need to go talk to somebody, you know. And even like now recently, you know, it wasn't, you know, a suicidal thought or anything. It was a feeling of like, you know, like Tell when she was like, I don't know, that feeling of like being lost. Like that's where I was, you know, a couple months ago. I was just like, I'm at my bottom, you know, I'm rock bottom and I don't know what else to do. So let's just see what works. You know, at that point it was like, you know, I got my medical card. Like it wasn't really helping. It was a Band-Aid, right? It wasn't fixing the problem, but going and actually talking to somebody like that was a big change.
I like that.
And Tell, did you have particular kind of like, so it sounds like you were also like, how did you sort of figure out that your mom kind of may not have been enough for what you needed? You know, and I can kind of frame that question a little bit more, but go ahead.
I just want to explain the how I got into therapy, because my mom telling me to go to therapy kind of went on for years, and I went to college and the conversation kind of died down, because I was fine for the first 2 years of college, but then it got really bad. And for me, it was waking up one day and saying, I'm gonna go jump off a bridge. And that's what I wanted to do. And I made the walk. And on the walk, I deviated and I went to urgent care and I told the doctor, I said, I'm not feeling good. He was like, what's wrong? I said, I don't want to live anymore. And he made the call to get me the help that I needed. I was away for probably 4 days, and my stream, like my community was wondering, you know, where was I? I was actually admitted.
Wow. And what did it feel like to kind of have, you know, I know this sounds kind of bizarre for a second, but putting myself in the shoes of many of the streamers that I've worked with, I also stream a little bit here and there. I can sometimes think that even in my mind, in those moments, that it's more important to stream than it is to actually like get the help for being suicidal. Like, you know, it sounds a little crazy, but I think a lot of people feel that way, right? Like, because the stream can actually be like it is for a lot of people more important than you. How did you deal with those feelings of like, you know, how were you able to give yourself permission to get help?
I couldn't, I don't know if I can put it into words. I think maybe in that moment I just knew I needed to be here. Like I don't want to go jump off that bridge. I want to be here, but I need some help. I need someone to tell me like why I'm here and why do I need to keep going.
Yeah. So I think that's a really like interesting answer, because what I would guess is that voice has been within you, right?
Yeah.
And there's something silly that we do where we stop listening to that voice for a long time. And I think this is where I'm kind of curious a little bit about, you know, what I'm hearing from both of y'all is that it's a process. And it kind of starts to get bad, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse. And what's that process like for y'all? What does it feel like on the inside when you guys are starting to kind of go downhill?
It's tiring.
Yeah, just a big shutdown.
And you don't want to turn the stream on certain days. And like, and then that feeling of not wanting to turn on the stream is like another bad feeling of like, man, I don't even want to do the one thing that I love doing, you know. And then it turns into like Have I loved it? Have I really ever loved it? You know, or like, was I doing it for all the wrong reasons? And then it starts turning in. So more and more self-doubt, you know, and it's like, oh man, well, like numbers are going down now. So now what do I do? You know, it's just like, and so, yeah, to your point, it's just like this constant snowball, and it's hard to get yourself out sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
and to your point, I don't know how to snap out of it sometimes. You know, it wasn't until recently until like I could start like, you know, meditating, or even like I started doing a gratitude journal at night. And so like I write down 3 things that I'm thankful for every night, you know, and like those things like started to like really help, you know, put it in perspective. And I think that's the hardest part, is like, because we are expected to do so many things, and like we're expected to multitask, and it's not just like being focused on playing a game, but it's also like being happy and being entertaining and being fun and energetic and making sure we look good, and, you know, making sure you're on top of your emails, like all this stuff. You know, it's just like we're not designed to multitask. We're not creatures who are designed to multitask, yet we are out here trying to do 10 things and scratch our head and bounce up and down on one foot. You know, and so it's just like there are days where you just don't want to do it, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you kind of relate to any of that?
Right now, yeah. Yeah. It
Can you help?
started, I think it was the Thursday. Sorry, it was the Thursday of last week when I started to feel the way Tim is explaining. And ever since, I've just been in that little dump.
I think the hardest part too, part of that feeling of going into like that cycle of like it just gets worse and worse and worse, is like when you say to yourself, like me, just like now saying like that sucks. Like I feel like I have to come up with a follow-up statement of like, my community is great and I am very thankful for them. You know, like that's like, and that's always the thing, is like I never want to complain, because I don't want people to think that I'm not grateful for the things that I have.
I'm going to pause you there, Tim, because I just
Yeah.
saw Tell flash an awesome smile. Tell, what just went through your head?
It's an agreement. Exactly what he said. It's like, you know, you don't want to let them down. You don't want to let your community down, but you also want to take care of yourself, and you want to be your best for them. It's finding that balance. It's a little rough sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm almost kind of like, you're talking about balance, but I wonder if it's really like paying the cost. What I'm kind of hearing from both of y'all
Mm-hmm.
is this idea that if you take care of yourself, by definition, you let your community down. It's a zero-sum game. There can only be one winner. It's almost like PvP between you and your community.
Yeah, dude.
and who's gonna get screwed, right?
Yeah.
Is it my mental?
Yeah.
Or is it all the people who are like suffering during the pandemic and need a little bit of joy?
Yeah.
Like someone's going to get screwed. It's such an interesting burden that y'all are talking about. What do y'all think about that?
It sucks. Like, I hate it. I hate that. And it's not just like us, you know, it's not just Tal and I.
Yep.
All the streamers are held to this standard. It doesn't matter if you have 2 viewers. The 2 viewer streamer, the person who just started streaming that day, is held to the same standard as Tim the Tapman.
They are.
It is like, and that's the hardest part, is like there is no differentiation between like someone who has been like a full-time streamer, who's like multi-million-dollar streamer, versus like someone who's just doing it as a hobby. You know, it's just like we are held to an insane standard.
Can y'all help me understand what is that standard that all streamers are held to? Like what is it? You know, what is it? What is?
I was gonna say, it's like showing up and being your best at all times. No, like you gotta just be your best, 100%, the whole entire stream.
You have to be 100%, 100% of the time.
Yeah, and that's sometimes nerve-wracking, because we're not always 100%.
Sometimes
we don't always wake up. We don't always wake up 100%. Sometimes we might lose 10% in a day. Sometimes we lose 10% by looking at our phone. We lose 10% if we don't eat, we don't shower, we don't do what we need to do. You keep losing that percentage, and now you're at 60, right, or 50, and you got to go stream. It's not going to be good.
Yeah. So what do you do when you're at 60%? You have to go stream, right? Where do you get that other 40%? Because 60% ain't enough.
For some, and some days for me, my stream will make up that 40. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes I can go live and have a better day than I'm having previously, or like before I pop the stream. So sometimes the stream might help out.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, I think actually, I think that's such a beautiful, we're supposed to be talking about burnout. And I think you guys have done a fantastic job of kind of teeing it up. Because I think this idea of burnout, it's like literally what Tell is describing, right? So there's like scientific definitions and there's a World Health Organization definition and things like that. But what I'm really hearing is you're supposed to be at 100%, then something happens and you drop down to 90, and then you drop down to 87, and then you drop down to 67 and 57, and that's not enough. So what you do is you pull that percentage out of yourself, right? Like you dig deep and you find something and you keep going. And it's actually really interesting because I think both of y'all have actually learned how to manage burnout well. So when Tell is saying, I actually lean on the community, because the truth is, like, as long as streaming is a PvP game, y'all are screwed. It's when streaming becomes a co-op game that we really see the best streaming, right? Because it's not just about the streamer, it's about the streamer plus the community. Yep. And what I'm hearing Tell actually say is that there are days that she leans on her community, that it's actually not like a one-way street where, all of the father-son connections in the world come down to like whether Tim streams Fortnite and you don't get to stream anything else, right? It's sort of like leaning on your community. And I love the way, Tim, that you said earlier that you didn't give them a chance. Sometimes we do something that's really interesting, which is that we don't give people a chance to support us, right? We make the decision for them. Yeah. We say like, oh, I'm going to take care of everything. Like, we kind of like build up these walls and stuff like that. But just hearing Tell talk about those percentages, like that's what burnout is, right? You start out nice, bright flame, starts to dim, starts to dim, starts to dim, and then you kind of run out of fuel. Mm-hmm. It's kind of dark and scary now that I'm kind of thinking about it, but it's such a good description. I'm kind of curious. So before we kind of hop to a lecture portion, which I think y'all have done an awesome job of teeing up, I'm curious, any kind of last thoughts or kind of comments?
I think this was fun.
Yeah, I like this.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for picking the hard route. I know I asked you all some hard questions, but I think rather than sort of having an academic discussion, really hearing you guys talk about your experience of, what it's like. It was kind of shocking, I think, to hear that y'all have struggled so much kind of individually with your own mental health. I think oddly enough, that makes you successful streamers. So I've noticed a trend that people who have suffered a lot in their personal life actually wind up like connecting with the audience. I think there's something about, as Tim was kind of saying, like we're all a little bit broken. And when you've sort of experienced that, there's something that allows people to connect to you. There's something that allows you to support your viewers. Yeah. Maybe I'm not quite sure, but I've heard that time and time and time again. And I want to thank both of y'all for, sharing so honestly, for taking the hard road that isn't just like, oh, like this is my journey of burnout. And then I did this, and then I had a kid and I discovered the joy of life. It's like it's hard questions, dude.
Yeah.
And your journey is, I get that both of y'all have a lot of gratitude. I get that both of y'all enjoy what you do. And I also hear that some days it really sucks.
Yeah.
And so conveying that, I think, is perfect. Cool. So what we're going to do is actually kind of switch gears for a second. We're going to hop over to a little bit of a more lecture format. So I'm going to explain a little bit about, defining burnout and what it is and where it comes from. And then I'm going to give people about 5 tips about how to deal with burnout. The awesome thing is that both of y'all, if people have been listening to this interview so far, actually both of you have teed up everything that I'm going to say. And I really love it because basically all of the color and all of the examples, everything that I'm going to talk about, y'all have basically learned how to do. So all of our tips, if y'all are listening and paying attention, like what you'll hear is that everything that I'm going to recommend is the reason that Tim and Tell are here today, because they had to sort of figure this stuff out. And I want y'all to really appreciate that like Tim and Tell have been working on this, right? Like it's been a years long journey with like different, y'all have stumbled and y'all have sort of figured out what works for you. And so our hope today is that by you sharing your stories, and we're going to give people a couple of summaries, that they don't actually have to they've got a little bit of a walkthrough because y'all showed up. right? You guys have streamed, a little bit of a walkthrough about how to deal with burnout, how to take care of yourself, how to deal with your internal anxieties of like resisting therapy or going to the gym. And so hopefully we'll really be able to help people today. So thank you all very much.
Of course.
Of course.
And then I think y'all are popping back in for questions at the end. Okay. So if anything pops up, let me know.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Okay. So burnout lecture. So first of all, thank you all very much for coming once again. So I'm Dr. K. I'm a psychiatrist and one of the co-founders of Healthy Gamer. And we do a lot of work with basically mental health for the digital generation. And one of the things that, so what our organization is kind of devoted to, and I think what Facebook Gaming takes very, very seriously, is that they're on the frontier of mental health. So it's not just about depression. It's not just about anxiety. It's really about sort of understanding these emerging mental health problems, and burnout is at the top of the list. So what I'd love to do today is share with you all some thoughts about how to understand what burnout is, how to differentiate, for example, what's burnout, what's depression, how to understand some of the key features of burnout. And then lastly, and most importantly, 5 actually actionable tips that y'all can actually do, which I think Tim and Tel have actually exemplified really, really well in terms of how to sort of act those out or what the effect of those are. So I think Tel and Tim are fantastic advertisements for what we're about to explain. And I think they're also, people say that the proof is in the pudding. I think they're also actually wonderful examples of how these things can actually work for you. So to begin with, burnout is a term that's about like 30 or 40 years old at this point, maybe even closer to 50. And people sort of realize that burnout is characterized by 3 major things. The first is a loss of motivation. So when people are burnt out, there are things that they normally enjoy doing, which suddenly like they have a lot of trouble doing. So things that used to be easy for you somehow start to become actually hard. And what you find is that you have to kind of dig deep. So we kind of heard that from Tel a little bit when she was talking about, being at 100%, going down to 90, going down to 80, going down to 70, going down to 60. And as you sort of start to, decay a little bit in terms of your motivation, that you really kind of dig deep, and then it sort of feels like a grind and it no longer kind of feels fun. So the first thing that we see in burnout is a lack of motivation. The second thing that we see in burnout is a lack of enjoyment. So something changes, and because it's kind of a slog, because it kind of feels like a grind, because it's actually super hard, that the things that you normally enjoy doing no longer kind of feel fun for you, right? So this is kind of interesting because if you think about your life, there are some things that kind of drain your battery and some things that recharge your battery. And one of the worst characteristics of burnout is the things that you used to rely on to actually help recharge you are now actually draining your battery. So things don't feel enjoyable. It's just hard to kind of have a good time, and it's hard to feel motivated. The third thing that we sort of really see with burnout, and actually this is the first thing that actually occurs to people. So if you look at the first stage of burnout, it's characterized actually by a loss of empathy. So if you look at physicians, for example, who are burnt out, or nurses who are burnt out, it's hard for them to care about other people. And what I've really seen that's slightly different in streaming is that what we see is a loss of self-empathy or self-compassion. So one of the things that we've sort of seen from Tel and Tim both is that they've learned how to be compassionate towards themselves. And I think Tel does a really good job of, she even like externalizes herself, right? She thinks about herself in the third person because it's so hard to care about yourself. So she even thinks like, what can I do for Tel? And that's actually such a beautiful technique that I'd encourage y'all to think a little bit about, is like, how can you almost think about yourself in the third person? Because this is something that's really interesting, right? So you can do wonderful things for other people. Like if your friend is sick, you can actually cook them a home cooked meal that's nutritious and healthy. You can do things for other people, but sometimes, especially if we're a streamer, we get caught in that trap between me versus my audience, right? And you'll continually pick the audience. You'll stream for 24 hours, 30 hours, 32 hours, 36 hours. Or you'll do other things like you'll stream games that you don't really enjoy or you're really tired of playing because that's what everyone's playing. And you got to do it for the views. You got to do it for the community. There can also be kind of a pressure because that's what people came to love you for, right? So like they love you because you play this game. And so if you stop streaming that game, it's going to hurt you. So it's either like there's this really tricky balance between you and the community. And so as people start to burn out, they sort of lose that empathy, they lose that self-compassion. People can start to become very, very cynical. So people who are burnt out because they have such low energy and such low motivation, they start to look at the negative side of all of, everything. So for example, this is kind of interesting, right? Because in streamers, for example, if you guys have 100 viewers today, and then if you're in a burnout kind of state and you have 100 viewers tomorrow, you'll view that as a loss. You'll be like, I'm not growing anymore, right? Whereas depending on your mood and depending on your mindset, consistency of viewership, at least you're not dropping down to 90, at least you're not dropping down to 80. But once we lose our sense of empathy, once we lose our sense of self-compassion, it actually colors the way that we look at things in a negative way. We can also start to feel really cynical towards our viewers. We can also start to be very sensitive, hypersensitive to criticism, which is an especially big problem in the age of social media, where at any given point, you're going to have 10 people that love you and 2 people that hate you. The downside is that as we burn out, we actually become hypersensitive to our critics. And this is already a situation that's kind of unfortunate for streamers, which is that streamers will oftentimes already be hypersensitive to criticism. So when we're kind of looking at burnout, there are 3 major attributes that we want to look at. One is a loss of motivation. The second is a loss of enjoyment. And the third is actually a loss of empathy. And that can also include self-empathy. Now, there are a couple of important points here. So people may ask, we heard from, both of our guests today that, they've struggled with something. Maybe it was depression. Maybe there was a little bit of suicidality sprinkled in, maybe a little bit of anxiety. So how do you understand the relationship between like mental health and burnout? And so this is where, I'm going to share with you guys as a psychiatrist, like what I think of in terms of like how to separate depression from burnout. So the first thing to understand is that clinical depression is an episodic disorder. So people will get episodes of depression. So I kind of almost think about it like the flu, where you're living your life and then depression kind of strikes. So it's sort of an external thing that comes and affects you. So one of the key hallmarks of depression is that sometimes people's life can be going well, but they feel depressed in spite of it, right? So when we really think about clinical depression, if we're thinking about kind of a neurochemistry imbalance in your brain, it's not necessarily circumstances. It's actually things that even if your circumstances are going well, you can actually feel pretty depressed. And the other important thing about depression is that, once again, it's an episode. So that means that it has a start period and it has an end period. The majority of the research actually suggests that depression resolves within about a year. So this is a key difference between burnout and depression, which is that depression can sort of strike. It can sometimes be triggered by negative circumstances, but then persists despite those circumstances. So if we're looking at depression, let's say I lost my job. So the loss of a job can trigger a depression, but then if I find a new job, the depression should go away. In patients who are clinically depressed, that depression will persist despite the circumstances fixing themselves. So depression is episodic, whereas when we really look at burnout, it tends to be like a chronic, like sort of steady, like decline. So we kind of heard this, especially from Tel, where, you start out and you're kind of like at full HP. And then you kind of like, it's kind of like a poison tick, right? Like you drop down to 90, you drop down to 80, you drop down to 70, and it's sort of time limited. So in burnout, what I really think of is like you're sort of sitting in these circumstances that are continually like depleting your energy, whereas depression will sort of strike out of the blue and may affect you for months or even a year. And then it'll actually naturally resolve. So your brain actually has internal mechanisms to balance itself, just like it balances your blood pressure and your heart rate. And just like you have internally balancing systems for like feeling hunger and feeling full. So depression will theoretically resolve on its own over time. Burnout is more steady, is a little bit more chronic, seems to be more circumstance related. The other important thing to remember is that the two actually intertwine with each other. So depression can actually make burnout worse, and burnout can actually make depression worse. And when we're looking at sort of the definition of burnout, until about 10 years ago, so for the first 40 years, the World Health Organization and some of these original researchers on burnout basically said that burnout is a work-related condition. That's actually how they differentiated it from depression. They said that burnout is like when you are at work and it's very stressful and it kind of weighs on you time and time and time again, and then you kind of get burnt out. And so they also assumed, for example, that if it's a work-related problem, it's got work-related solutions. And there is some evidence to that. But the interesting thing is that over the last 10 years, there's been a ton of research. And what they've actually done is they've sampled people who have been burnt out. And what they discovered was actually not something that they expected. So about 40% of people who burn out will say that it's related to my job stress or it's related to something at work. 40% of people will actually say it's not related to work at all. It's actually related to something in my personal life. And about 20% of people are kind of indeterminate or maybe half and half. So as we understand burnout better, we've started to realize that, your real life and your work life both contribute to burnout. And that actually kind of dealing with both of them is sort of the solution to stopping burnout. So now what we're going to do is kind of jump into a couple of key tips, okay? And the first thing that we're going to build off of is this concept, this seminal research more recently that, 40% of burnout is caused by home life, 40% of burnout is caused by work life. So the first thing that you've got to do when you're burnt out is to try to find balance in your home life and work life. Now, this is a really important distinction. So a lot of people think that work-life balance means working less and somehow like going to the gym or whatever, like spending more time at home. But what I've actually discovered and what we've seen a lot with content creators is that if your home life is a mess, you're going to carry that into streaming. And if your streaming life is a mess, you're going to carry that into home, right? So I want you all to think about this. We talk about streamers as like putting on a mask, but at the end of the day, like the body and the brain is the same, right? Like you can put on a mask, but you carry the brain from home into your work, and you carry the brain from work into your home. So this is where a lot of people will think like, if you feel burnt out, what a lot of streamers will do is they'll jump to solutions like, I need to stop streaming, or I need to cut down on my hours, or I need to take a vacation, or I need to stream less content, or I need to get off of social media or things like that. And so when you have problems at work, when you feel burnt out at work and people are thinking, like you have this thought in your head, right? Should I quit streaming or should I quit my job? It doesn't even have to be streaming. You can be a programmer, you can work in retail, you can be in finance, whatever. People will think like, oh, I need a different boss or I need to change jobs or whatever. But remember that the way that you feel at work, your attitude at work, your cognitive biases at work, remember we talked a little bit about when you lose empathy, you start to see things in a negative light. What you actually should also focus on is what's your home life like, right? We heard this from Tim, that his journey of healing and his journey of balance started with 90 minutes at the gym, right? That was the concrete thing that he did for himself. We also heard from Tel that a lot of her journey started with support from her mom and actually like deciding to go into therapy. And so sort of fixing your home life, which I know a lot of gamers, we as gamers don't like doing that, right? So I can tell you like, oh, unfortunately, you can't just change the game that you play and it's going to fix your burnout. You can't just switch jobs and it's going to fix your, you're going to be happy if you switch jobs and the grass is greener on the other side. Unfortunately, the real answer to this problem is that you have to stop being a degen at home, right? So it means like cleaning stuff. It means eating. It means like taking care of yourself physically, going to see a therapist. Because remember that the brain is the same. Like you are the common element between both of those things. And what a lot of people have found in terms of sort of resolving burnout is that when you can leverage some of that stuff from home, it can actually improve your situation at work. The flip side of that is to also find balance within work. And so now we're going to kind of move on to point number 2, which is what I sort of call like thinking about your energy battery. So a lot of research shows that when we think about what drains us, about 80% of our drain comes from 20% of our work. So it's another good example of like the 80-20 rule, or sometimes even like the 90-10 rule. So if you look at medicine, for example, doctors will work 24-hour calls, they'll work 30-hour calls, and it's like a lot of work. And yet, if you ask doctors, what's the worst part of your job? They won't say it's the 30-hour call. What they'll say is it's dealing with insurance companies. So I can see patients for 30 hours a day. Because that's what I came here to do, right? And if you're a streamer, like you came here to like vibe with your community. You came here to play games. You came here to have a good time. You came here to like, to live it up and sort of like be chilling and vibing and all that good stuff. You came here to own noobs. It's the other stuff that can really kind of get you down, right? So for physicians, it's like spending an hour, like I can see 10 patients a day, but it is mind numbing to wait on hold with an insurance company to try to get a medication approved for a patient that needs it. Right. So like if you really look at research on what burns people out, it kind of comes to the 80-20 rule. So the next thing that I'd recommend is that y'all actually diagnose where most of your energy drain comes from. So for streamers, for example, you may find that like streaming on weekends is just a little bit too much, that you can stream 5 days a week, but that sixth day is what really tanks you. Or you may find that it's something relating to social media. So like even some amount of social media you can do. But for a lot of streamers, what we've sort of discovered is it's not just social media in general. It's like specifically checking social media before bed. So I'll give you guys a very concrete example of this. So sometimes streamers will find the streamer that is better than them. And what they'll always do is compare themselves to someone who's like growing a little bit faster. And I've noticed that this doesn't happen like in the early morning hours, right? It usually happens like before bed or something like that, where there's some things that we'll do that will actually, drastically drain our energy. So at work, there may be particular tasks. So like for me as a physician, it's like billing stuff and like dealing with insurance companies. For some people, it's social media. For other streamers, actually, they love the social media. For some streamers, it's like answering emails or things like that. And so really what you have to do if you want to really think about burnout is remember that not all tasks will drain your battery the same. And so what I would encourage people to do is you can do two exercises. One is y'all both heard the value of, or y'all heard from both of these folks about the value of journaling. So take 1 week, and at the end of every day of that week, grab a piece of paper and write down what are the things that I liked about today and what are the things that are the most draining about the day. If you're someone who has trouble journaling every day, right? Because that may be a big part of the population because you just don't even have the consistency. It's totally cool. The other thing you can do is just go for a gut reaction, which is if you could change one thing about in your life, what would it be? And so that's a really good technique to sort of dig into, where's that 80% drain coming from? If you could change one thing about streaming, what would it be? And it may be something like, oh my God, I suck at answering like sponsorship emails or like things like that. I get super, super anxious about like meetings with, other stream teams or like with my account managers, or I get super anxious every day when I look at my metrics. And so what you can sort of do is diagnose where the majority of your burnout is coming from. And once you sort of go through that process, then you can start to act on it. And this is one of the most awesome things about kind of doing this is once you start to intervene on it, you can start to actually feel really good about it. So the ways that you can intervene on it, there are a couple of different things you can do. One is you can just offload it. So remember that as a streamer, like sometimes you'll hopefully have support systems. So, if, for example, you don't enjoy editing videos or you don't, enjoy like posting stuff to your socials or things like that, as you hopefully become a little bit more successful, you can actually like outsource some of the work that's really stressful. The second thing that you can do is actually just ask for help around it. So this is sort of related to outsourcing, but you can even ask someone to like help you with kind of the stuff that's sort of hard. And then the third thing that you can do is actually compile it or compress it to one time. So this is where, for example, when I'm working with physicians and they don't enjoy doing billing, I know it's kind of weird, but like, doing half an hour of billing every day can actually drain people more than just like doing 2 hours of billing at once. You take like, 2 hours of your day and it's going to suck. You turn on some music and you just power through that. And the good news is that gets compressed. So you really only feel crappy for one day. So there may be some amount of compressing the activities that you don't like. When it comes to asking for help, that can sometimes, maybe you can talk to your account manager or something like that. They may be able to do something. Or what you can really do is outsource the tasks that cost you a lot of energy. Now, a lot of people may be like, oh, but I can't afford to do that. And that's where we're going to get to point number 3. So point number 3 when it comes to burnout is watch out for your internal sense of resistance. Okay. So a lot of y'all know exactly what you need to do, but there's this little voice in your head that's going to give you like a big, but don't do it, right? I can't do it because of XYZ. So people are telling you to go to therapy. They're telling you need to go to the gym. They're telling you need to take some time off. Even you're telling yourself, I just need to do this. But there's that voice in your head, right? That voice that's paranoid and afraid and is telling you that if you stop doing this, your viewers are going to disappear. They're going to like slough off and they'll go to your competitors and everything. The world is going to come crashing down around you. So you really have to watch out for that voice of resistance. that voice that doubts what you should be doing. And pay attention to it, because you'll see it. Like if you really learn to pay attention to it, you can catch it in action. Because there are going to be times in your life, and I'm pretty sure that like most of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about, where you know you should do something. And as you know you're going to do it, there's this little voice that pops in your head that says, oh, but if you do that, everything is going to come falling apart. And so really pause for a second and think about, where is that voice coming from? Where is that internal resistance coming from? And what you'll oftentimes find is that it's coming from an emotion. It's coming from something like an uncertainty or a fear. And it's not actually logical, right? So we've heard today from Tel and Tim, and if you guys are in the community, y'all know like streamers take breaks all the time. Like every streamer who has been streaming for like at least a year or two has taken some kind of break. And some of these people still have, most of them actually still have huge followings. And this is where I want y'all to really pay attention to what Tim said, right? Is that he gave his community like the respect of telling them, hey, I need to set some limits, right? He even modeled for them, hey, it's like maybe healthy for y'all to set limits too, because he's doing it, right? And even Tel sort of says, when I'm feeling at 60%, I'm going to kind of respect my community and I'm going to let them do the lifting. And that actually brings y'all closer together. Even as someone who's like been in communities, right? I'm a fan, and like, it actually makes you feel good if you know that like you're supporting your like people that you watch in some way. So be careful about that voice of resistance and really watch out for it, because it's really, really sneaky and it's really holding you back. And the truth is that things are not going to come falling apart if you start to take care of yourself. So the next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is actually just asking for help. So I don't know if y'all kind of realize this, but like basically every person who's successful is going to ask for help at some point. And the cool thing, the really awesome thing about what Facebook Gaming is putting together here today, and like what we're doing today, is that these people have kind of stumbled along this road and they found this road. And if you really pay attention, a lot of it turns around when people start asking for help, right? And sometimes like that help can actually be life-saving. So Tim literally told us that I guess he had a gun in the house, and he took the gun to his wife and he's like, hey, this is not a safe thing for me to have anymore, right? And that's like a really, really scary prospect. Tel told us that she was like literally walking towards, a bridge, and she decided to deviate towards urgent care and asked for help. And so the truth is that life is not a PvP game, and it's not even a solo player game. Like life is a multiplayer game with a persistent universe, and it's a co-op game. Like we're all in it together. If we think about this event and what's going on right now, like we're all in this together, right? We're here to share information with you. We are the wiki. We are the walkthrough. So listen to what we're saying and actually go and get the help. Be careful a little bit about, that little voice in your head that says, oh, people like don't like you, or like they have their own problems. It can come up with such logical things. Oh, I don't want to burden them, right? But this is where the truth is that ultimately, like asking for help is such an OP technique. Like it's the thing that needs to be nerfed in life the most. Because when you start reaching out for help, like you can go and see a therapist. They have trained for years and have potentially decades of experience. And what they can do is leverage that experience for your benefit. That is so OP. And so what I want you guys to do is ask for help, which is like one of the most OP things you can do in real life. And the last thing that I'm going to kind of share with y'all is an action orientation versus an outcome orientation. So this is especially hard in streaming, but the simple truth is that it applies to all attributes of life. So if you look at research on optimal performance, what you find is that people who do the best work are the ones who focus on the action and not the outcome. So I'll kind of give you guys a good example of this, okay? So the students who do the best are not the ones who try to study to get an A. They're the ones who try to study to learn the material. So this is something that I see a lot is, so I'm faculty at Harvard Medical School, and I'll get a lot of medical students that come and kind of rotate through the hospitals, right? And so these are medical students who are at Harvard. So they're really good at getting good grades. And what I see is that there are two kinds of medical students. Some come in and they're gunners and they want to get good grades. They want to get honors. They want to get A's, right? And so they're super paranoid. They're really good at like kissing ass and brown nosing and all that good stuff. And you kind of see right through them because you can see all they care about is the grade, right? They want to get some fancy letter so they can go to some fancy whatever. And then there are the students who are actually there to learn medicine. And so one of the key things that I try to explain to people is like, I don't think they get it. So like, and it's not really their fault, because if you think about someone who winds up, in medical school, they studied really hard in high school, they studied really hard in college, they studied really hard for their standardized tests. And so they got into medical school. But at some point, medical school is not about grades, right? Medical school is actually about saving lives. And so what you should really focus on is learning the material, because one day you're going to be on an airplane and you're going to hear this speaker, on the PA, someone's going to say, is there a doctor on the plane? And that person doesn't care what you got on your test. The question is, what do you know? And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that is absolutely true for streaming as well, in any other dimension of life. So there's lots of research that's been done on the flow state, right? Optimal performance, professional athletes, esports, streaming. And ultimately what it comes down to is not the numbers. So I know this sounds kind of paradoxical, but the streamers who get the highest views are not the ones who are chasing the views. They're the ones who are making really authentic and like awesome content, right? It's a focus on the content. It's about getting the right attitude when you show up to stream. It's about when Tel like listens to the music. She's not listening to the music, because listening to the music doesn't increase her viewer count. It doesn't do that, right? It's not like anyone at home knows that she's listening to this music. She listens to the music to put herself in the right headspace. When she's in the right headspace and she goes to work, when she starts streaming and she's in the right headspace, through an organic kind of flow state sort of interaction, viewers will enjoy that more, right? You can't force chilling or vibing. You just can't force it. You have to be in the right kind of mood. You have to kind of be in that flow state. And so this is where it's kind of paradoxical, but the more you focus on the outcome, the more it destroys your inner peace and the harder it is to create authentic and lively content. Because if you're watching your view count, you guys may know this. If you're watching your view count, it starts to dip and you start stressing out about it. What happens to your flow? What happens to the game that you play? What happens to your interaction with chat? Your brains only have a limited amount of RAM. And if you want to get into that awesome like streamer flow, if you want to get into the awesome flow of like studying and learning material, it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Any kind of flow state happens when you devote yourself to the action instead of the outcome. Now, I'm not saying that you should ignore metrics. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, go through them and sort of try to optimize your stream. But at the end of the day, if you focus on the action as opposed to the outcome, it'll ultimately produce, paradoxically, a better outcome. It's the student who tries to learn and master the material who ends up getting the A, not the student who's gunning for an A. I mean, practically both of them do, but generally speaking, the students who focus on learning do way better. So the last kind of paradoxical point here is that if you're shooting for an A and you get a B, what does it do? It actually tanks your motivation, right? Because you were shooting this for this target and you didn't meet it. And so it does this really tricky thing where if you're like shooting for a particular target and you don't meet it, what it's actually going to do is like decrease your motivation. Whereas if you approach every day and sort of focus on the action, I'm going to stream and I'm going to do the best that I can. And even if you don't hit some kind of target, you can still look at that and you can still sort of notice and you can say, oh, like I didn't do quite as well as I wanted to. Let me think about how I can do better tomorrow. But it's the people who focus on the action itself that sort of changes your mindset and lets you improve the next day. Versus if you're shooting for a particular metric or a particular level of performance and you don't hit it, then you're going to actually decrease your motivation. You're going to feel kind of depressed and it's going to be hard. And then the next day, you're going to have to sort of force yourself to stream because it didn't turn out how you wanted it to. And so this is kind of a very paradoxical principle, but it's really important, which is to kind of really focus on the action instead of the outcome. So just to kind of summarize, there are a couple of different important points about burnout. The first is that burnout is discrete from mental illness. So burnout tends to be characterized by a loss of motivation, a loss of empathy, and a loss of enjoyment. Burnout can be related to work stuff, and it can also be related to not work stuff. And the key thing to remember there is that the brain and the body are absolutely the same, right? You carry the burnout, you carry that burnt out brain when you're stressed out at home and you're like, having a fight with your spouse or your partner, and you go on to stream. That brain is the same. That stress is the same. Anytime you get stressed out, your body produces this hormone called cortisol, and that cortisol is going to be flowing through your system and shatter your ability to get into a flow state. Okay, so like you carry that brain with you. So the first thing to understand is you got to take care of yourself at home and you got to take care of yourself at work. The second thing to understand is that each and every one of us has a set amount of energy, a set amount of RAM, a set amount of HP or MP, or call it whatever you want to. And the truth is that not all of the activities of your day really drain that energy the same amount. If some of y'all work in retail, you'll know this. Sometimes you get customers that are complete pains in the ass, right? And so like when that one customer walks in, you can deal with a dozen customers, but when you get one customer who kind of walks in and is a complete pain, it sort of shatters your entire day. So pay attention to what it is that's actually draining the majority of your energy, because chances are it's not actually the majority of work. And once you understand what's draining the majority of your energy, you can start to take steps to hopefully deal with it. Either you can compress it to a tiny amount of time, like once a week, so that you just have one day that's ruined. Or what you can do is actually even potentially outsource it and be really careful there, because you may not think that you want to outsource it. But those are two ways that you can kind of deal with the energy drain. The next thing that you all need to watch out for, so the third thing that we have to watch out for with burnout, is the little voice in your head that doesn't let you take care of yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you never fill up the gas tank, you're going to run out of gas. So be careful, because a lot of people actually know what they need to do. It's actually the internal resistance which keeps you from doing it. So the way that you overcome that internal resistance, it has to start by catching it. So I don't know if you guys, play games that there's like a stealthed enemy in, but like, what's the first step of like dealing with a stealthed enemy? It's like detecting the enemy. You have to be aware of it first. So yogis from ancient like India and in China and in Japan and stuff for thousands of years have been saying that awareness precedes control. And in medicine, good diagnosis precedes good treatment. When someone comes into my office, I don't just like give them chemotherapy or antidepressants or Viagra, right? I have to like diagnose them first. It's like, oh, like, I'm sorry, you have a stomach ache? Oh, then I shouldn't have given you Viagra. It's like, duh. But the problem is that a lot of times what holds us back is things that we're not aware of, right? We don't recognize what we're doing. We're not paying attention to that little voice in our head that holds us back. So start by detecting it, start by catching it in the act, and then you can start working on it. The next thing to think of, this is the most OP technique in life, is asking for help, right? Because life is not a single player game. It's not a PvP game. It's a co-op game in a persistent universe. And the good news is that there are a lot of people there who are there to help you, right? So Tim, it sounds like, has family. Tel has her community. She also has family. So there's got to be someone out there, whether it's friends, it's strangers on the internet. You can walk into a doctor's office or go see a therapist and they'll be in your corner. There are a lot of people out there who are willing to help you. And if you think, oh, no, if your response to that statement is no, there aren't, or they wouldn't want to help me, or I'm not worth helping, there's the little voice of resistance in your head, right? So be careful about that. Be careful about the voice that's telling you not to do the things that are good for you. And the last thing to kind of think about is a sort of a change in mindset. So this is where there's an awesome researcher named Carol Dweck who wrote this book called Mindset. And what she sort of essentially discovered is that some people have a growth mindset and some people have a performance mindset. And it's people who are looking to grow and sort of realize that, it's a learning experience and I'm never going to be perfect, that end up actually outperforming the people who are trying to perform. And so this is also an ancient principle that's been known by the yogis for thousands of years, which is called karma phal in Sanskrit, which means the fruits of your actions. So as a human being, I know it sounds kind of weird, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. This is going to sound kind of bizarre, but if you are a streamer, there is nothing you can do to control how many people show up on your stream. It is literally not yours to control. All you can control is hitting that go live button. All you can control is turning on the stream. All you can control is your actions and playing the game. You can't force people into the door, right? Sure, there's all you can do, like you can set your notifications, you can post stuff on Instagram. Those are all actions, but you cannot force another human being to do anything. So this is something that's very shocking to understand. I'm not saying ignore metrics. I'm not saying don't do all of those things. By all means, take the right actions, but recognize that you as a streamer or in any other situation, all you control is your actions. You do not control the outcome of your actions. There's one last example that I'll leave y'all with, which is unfortunately one that you have to learn in medicine. So I want you guys to understand this. No doctor can save any patient's life. It is impossible. All you can do is provide treatment. right? When you're working in the emergency room and a patient walks in the door, you have no idea whether you can save that person's life or not. You're not God. You are not a magical healer, right? Depending on what walks in the door determines like what's going to happen. So you can try your hardest and you can absolutely train, you can absolutely prepare, you can study really hard, and thankfully most doctors do. And at the end of the day, it is not within my power as a doctor to give someone life or give them death. I can't do that, right? I can't force someone to be alive. So all I can do is the best that I can do. I can give them the best treatment. I can be the most thoughtful about my diagnosis and what tests I order. And as a streamer, I know it sounds kind of weird. You can't force people to come in and watch your stream, right? You can't force yourself to make a viral piece of content. Like advertisers have been trying this stuff for years where they're like, oh, like, let's go viral. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of people don't understand like viral marketing, but they'll hire people because they advertise that they're viral marketers. But you can't make something go viral. It's like literally impossible. It's some sort of secret sauce that you can't create. And so as a streamer, take a step back from that. Even if you're not a streamer, if you're a viewer, even if you're playing a video game, you can't force yourself to win any game that you ever play. Because at the end of the day, maybe single player games, but in any kind of multiplayer game, there's other people in there, right? They're going to influence things. And when you tilt, when it blows up your performance, like what are you getting focused on? It's other people. Oh, I've got a noob who's feeding. And then you tilt. And then it's like no fun, but you can't control the noob. So why are you getting bent out of shape over it, right? So it's kind of really bizarre, but like, don't worry about winning or losing the game. Worry about playing the best game you can. Don't worry about how many people are showing up at your stream. By all means, observe the metrics, let your subconscious churn over all that data, and just try to create the best stream that you can. Because if you create the best stream, you get your, you devote yourself to creating a good stream, that's going to ultimately lead to the best performance. So I think, that's a quick summary. So I think we're going to actually hop back to Tel and Tim and cover a couple of questions.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
That was good. That was so deep. There were so many people in chat that were like, this is speaking so much to me right now. So
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Here. A lot of people are resonating with this.
I think y'all did an awesome job of teeing it up. Like I feel like I couldn't have scripted it better.
Nice.
So is this where we get to ask you questions?
Absolutely, man.
Perfect. Okay. Tel, would you like to go first?
Yes. My big question is, how do you let other people know that they're contributing to your burnout?
Ooh, that's a good one. So unfortunately, so I'm going to share with y'all a little bit of research. So they took 12,000 kids, I think, in the state of New York, and they put 6,000 of them in a class that teaches them emotional and social skills training, almost like mathematics, history, whatever. And what they found is that the half of the kids that were in this class actually got one letter grade higher than the control group. So like learning how to talk to people is actually worth like 11 points on a test. It's kind of crazy. So when there are people that are contributing to your burnout, I think it's really hard, but I think you've got a couple of different options. One is that you kind of try to isolate them, right? Like, so you try to limit your contact to them because sometimes it's really hard and you can't set limits. But the other thing is just to let them know. I know it's really hard, but sort of let them know in sort of an authentic and compassionate way. I think those are the two really key things. So you don't want to blame them. You don't want to say, hey, you're doing this and it's really like it's your fault. You want to kind of keep the things focused on yourself a little bit and share with them what effect it has on you and doing your best of like not really blaming them. So you can kind of say like, hey, when you like mom, when you walk in the door and like you're asking me if I'm studying, like it makes it actually really hard for me to study. So you can kind of focus on the effect on you and sort of keep it like pretty simple. So you also want to be a little bit careful about like not making it a very long conversation, because the longer the conversation you make it, like the more they're going to feel blamed or attacked. And then the last thing that you can kind of do is like when you share with them your feedback, there's like sort of an interesting technique where you can say, hey, what you're doing is having this effect on me. I really don't blame you for it, but I'd appreciate you if you stopped. And then there's a key technique you can use. You can ask them immediately afterward, what do you think about that? And then just listen to what they have to say. And so like, as soon as you sort of share your feedback and then you kind of like throw the ball in their court, and then you don't keep arguing with them, you just like hear what they say. And then you kind of just reflectively listen to it. Hey, when every time you message me online, like it actually like disrupts my flow and it makes it really hard for me to work. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't do that. What do you think about that? Well, I message you because I care and because I'm worried about you and this kind of stuff. And then you actually repeat back to them. So you ask them, what do you think about that? And you repeat back to them, whatever they say. Oh, I understand what you're saying. You care about me. You're worried about me. And that's why you message me. I'd still really appreciate it though, because even though I recognize you care about me and I recognize you're doing it for the right reasons, it actually has sort of the opposite effect. So I'd appreciate if you stopped messaging me. Does that make sense? So kind of say it to them plainly, don't blame them, ask them what they think about it, because that gives them a chance to talk, really listen to them and acknowledge kind of what they're saying, but then kind of keep that boundary firm. So those are the 3 steps. Does that help?
Yes, got it.
Unfortunately, if you have a super narcissistic parent, you're going to need to do a little bit more than that. But once again, that's not something you can control, right?
Yeah.
All right. My question, and I'm really interested by this question, and I'm very intrigued to see what your answer is. Some of the factors that what are the biggest factors that you think go into affecting streamers' mental health? And then I also wanted to ask you if you've heard of the term streamer brain, and if that's something that streamers are actually something that we need to worry about.
Well, so tell me what streamer brain is.
So a streamer, a friend of mine, Ammunition, made a tweet a few months ago. And a lot of streamers chimed in saying they were experiencing the same thing. And it was fogginess, the inability to read certain words correctly, even though you know what those words are. You've said them before, but when you read it, it doesn't come out correctly. Memory loss, things like that. I was just curious if you had come across that in any of your studies.
So I don't know specifically about streamer brain, because I think the key thing here is that, how can I say this? So technology is affecting us in a very rapid way. And I don't know if y'all like get this, but like medical science is slow, right? So we have like a COVID vaccine, which took, the whole world working for like a year or 14 months or whatever, like in a dedicated fashion. That's like one of the fastest things in medicine.
Yeah.
So if you think about, our research on burnout is still like sort of in its early stages, and we've been doing it for like 40 or 50 years. The average clinical trial from inception to end, to like think about the trial and conduct the study, takes 3 years. So technology is evolving way more rapidly than like medical science can keep up. So this is where I'd say I've heard people use the term streamer brain, but because there aren't studies on streamer brain. So I don't know exactly what the definition is. The first is, if y'all are feeling it, like that's real, bro. Like that's the end of it, right? Whether medical science is willing to accept that it's real or not is like a separate issue. But if this is a shared experience that a lot of streamers are having, then it is real. Yeah. So here's what I've kind of found as it relates to streamer brain. So once, like I was saying, like you carry your brain and body with you, right? And so what a lot of streamers will do is like, because of the grind, because of kind of ego, because of comparison and those kinds of things, people don't really give themselves a break. So for example, sleeping 2 hours less than optimal on a daily basis is the equivalent of being like tipsy at all times from a cognitive perspective. So like if you lose 2 hours of sleep, you're basically like tipsy the next day. And so we know that there are a lot of things that streamers tend to do, which will lead to like negative cognitive, performance. So like I totally get that streamer brain, seems to happen, and it's a shared thing. In terms of what do streamers do that sort of affects their burnout the most, I'd say the biggest thing is sort of like ego, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So what I mean by ego is not sort of the Western ego, but like the sense of identity. So once you sort of identify with your stream and your value as a human being becomes tied to your numbers, that's where the road to burnout begins, right? Because then it's not about you. That's when you start to sacrifice yourself. Like, I am a good person if my viewership is climbing. Yeah. Or, I'm a bad person if my viewership is going down. Once my life becomes encompassed by streaming, that's sort of like embarking on the road to burnout, because then you're not in control anymore, right? You become a slave to the numbers, you become a slave to the metrics. And the really sad thing is that there are some streamers who are actually very successful who do that. The problem is that their life is an absolute mess outside of it.
Is that the equivalence to like tennis, like the tennis star who didn't like playing tennis, but like won all those championships, but they just were unhappy the whole time?
Yeah. So this is the really interesting thing. Okay. So like, y'all have to understand this. Absolutely, Tim. So remember that being a successful streamer does not necessarily mean that you're not burnt out, right? So like, you can sacrifice yourself and burn out. The good news is that in my experience, and if you really talk to a lot of streamers, like yourselves, for example, what you tend to find is this pattern that the majority of them who last and actually do pretty well are the ones who learn some degree of work-life balance, are the ones who learn to set limits on sort of identifying with their performance. Because the truth is, like, y'all are streamers, so like the internet is going to like meme you and flame you and hate you at some time. It's going to happen, right? You can't avoid it. It's just the internet has short attention span. I love the internet, and like, I'm not blaming them because I'm a part of it, right? So I'm guilty of it too. But that's just the nature of the world that we live in with like Twitter and stuff like that, right? So you really have to learn how to separate yourself from the streaming. Or in a weird way, like, you have to offer your most authentic self to the stream, which is kind of what's tricky about it. That's why so many people kind of fall into this trap of like identifying with it, right? Because you have to offer your authentic self, but then learn how to create some kind of boundaries. So if you have a bad stream, it doesn't mean that you are a bad streamer. Do you guys kind of get that?
Yes.
Yeah.
The core of the problem is like being able to say, I had a bad stream, not I am a bad streamer. And there's a very subtle but key difference. And when people start to say, I am a bad streamer, that's when they start to burn out.
It's because you're taking the feeling and you're taking it on as yourself, like that you are the embodiment of that thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's when the event or the performance or the outcome becomes you.
Right.
Right.
It's just like saying like, I'm angry. Like, no, you're not angry. You're feeling angry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. So this is where, like, if you look at, I'm sorry, Tom.
I was saying I had to learn that one.
Same.
I'm feeling angry. I'm not angry.
Exactly.
Like,
So thousands of years ago, there was a guy named Buddha, who sort of made this discovery. This is actually the crux of what he discovered, is that identification with our feelings is the source of suffering. And so he attained this state of mind called enlightenment. And what that is, like, his definition of that is like this process of stepping away from and no longer identifying with like the things around you. And so it's kind of bizarre, but once you kind of step away and you realize that I'm over here and the stream is over there, that's actually what allows you to like be authentic, to be chill, to be detached from it. And then you can actually have a good time, right? Like, it's hard to have a good time when you're stressed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Great question.
Love it.
Do you have another one? Let's see.
We probably have time for maybe one more.
You got one, Tel?
I do not. Do you?
Cool. Yeah. So I would like to know, if someone is going through a burnout, let's say a streamer is going through a burnout, what are some tips that you could give for them to work through that? Or maybe, maybe for a streamer, they can tell their community like, hey, I'm going through this thing. Here's what we can do together to get through it.
That's a fantastic question. So, one thing that I haven't talked about, but that I'm a big fan of, and Tim, I think you mentioned that you do this too. So meditation has been shown as an evidence-based intervention that actually reduces burnout. So I think meditation is also something that is pretty cool. Like, I actually meditate when I do stream. I'll meditate with my stream.
That's cool.
So I think that it's cool, right? Because like, streaming has moved beyond gaming. So you'll have like workout streams and stuff like that. So I think actually, if you're talking about things that you can do with your stream, I think meditation is actually at the top of the list. So you, like, even between games and stuff like that, if you're kind of tilted, like, you can meditate for a couple of minutes. And then this is where, once again, your streamer brain may be saying, but, oh, like, what if people don't like it? And they kind of like leave and go watch something that's more entertaining, stuff like that. I totally get it. So oftentimes I'll meditate at the end of my stream. The other thing is you can also meditate for a short amount of time. So evidence shows that, for example, if you meditate for about 18 minutes, 16 minutes, I'm not suggesting you do this on stream, but 18 or 16 minutes is the amount of time it takes to shut off cortisol production from your brain, which is a stress hormone. So that should be your target in your personal life. In terms of what to do on stream, so this is kind of interesting. Really 60 to 90 seconds is enough to activate your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is the thing that actually reduces your heart rate, reduces your blood pressure, basically gets rid of tilt. So when you tilt, your body has a sympathetic or an adrenaline response in your body. And I don't know if you guys like remember this, but like adrenaline hits fast, right? Adrenaline actually hits your bloodstream in like less than a second. So you can actually meditate for a very brief amount of time, like 60 to 90 seconds, kind of like recharge. It can actually be like really great. Like as you're kind of queuing up for a match, you're like, hey, let's like meditate for a minute. All right, we ready to go? We ready to like own these noobs? Like, let's go. Right. And I think that once if they see you doing this and they see you owning noobs, then they're going to start doing it too.
Yeah.
So I think meditating with your stream is like a great place to start. And then, in terms of if you are burning out, I'd say like the other stuff that we talked about at the top of the list, honestly, Tim, is just asking for help, man.
Do you think it's okay to have that open conversation like with your chat of just like, for my example, like switching games, like I'm just like, I'm so tired of this game. Like, is it better to have that conversation? I'm like, hey guys, like, I'm ready to change this game. What do you think? Like, what do you think the next game is like we should play? Like, I mean, like, what are some of those tips where like people can get their like, again, get that community involvement?
Yeah, I think, Tim, I think you gave me the answer, dude. The answer was in the question, right? So it's kind of interesting because like, I watch a lot of MOBA streamers, for example. And like, even if you're a viewer in chat, like how many hours at a stretch can you watch someone play an FPS? Right. So like what happens, it's kind of interesting because like viewers will hop around once they get bored of what you're streaming. So I'd say do it exactly how you said it. Right. And if you think about your most successful streams, they're the ones where there's interaction with you in chat. Like you can move the mouse cursor, you can shoot the RPG, you can toss the grenade, but chat can't.
Yeah.
So like actually getting your community involved and sort of saying to them, hey, like, I'm kind of not feeling this anymore. Like, what do you guys like? If y'all really want me to play, we'll keep playing this, but like, what would y'all rather see instead? And I think you can also frame the question in an interesting way, right? Like, what do y'all want to do instead? So you can kind of like take some of the decision out. You can sort of lay out, it's a little bit sneaky, a little bit psychiatric manipulative, where you're sort of saying, hey, we're going to switch, right? You don't necessarily have to ask them, do I have to keep playing this? Because if you ask, do I have to keep playing this, they're going to troll you and they're going to say yes.
So here's me playing the devil's advocate. What if the community starts to essentially backseat the game decision? Like, oh, you asked for a game and they start just throwing you all these games. Like, that's not the game I was looking for. Like when you're looking for permission to change to something else, but it's not the stuff that you're looking for, and then you get frustrated. Because I've seen streamers do it. I've done it myself where I'm like, hey guys, like, I was thinking about this game, switching and playing this game, and someone's like, oh, why don't you play this game or play this game and play this game? And then it becomes kind of like almost annoying.
Well, so this is where, so this is important, Tim. If you are not looking for an open-ended answer, don't ask an open-ended question.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. Like, so this is where like, I'm going to go ahead and side with chat on this one. I'm sorry, Tim. But if you're asking us, it's sort of like, so my wife does this to me where she's like, what do you want for dinner? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'll have pizza. And she's like, do you want Thai? And I'll say, no. It doesn't occur to me that like, if she asks me if I want Thai, like I get to answer. Right.
Yeah.
And so if you're asking your chat, hey chat, what do y'all want to play? And then they like say something, then that's like, be straight with them. Be like, hey chat, I want to switch games, but I'm not willing to play like Fall Guys and I'm tired of New World and I don't want to play FPS. Yeah. Give me something else. So it's a relationship, and that relationship can't be based on like false communication. You got to like, if you want to make a switch, signal that to chat, but don't ask him a question like if you're not going to respect their answer. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I've seen so many streamers do that, and I wanted to get it out there and see what you said. So
yeah, no, it's great, dude. Like it's a respectful relationship both ways. So by all means, you can tell them, hey, I'm not feeling this. I want to do like A or B. Like by all means, you can give them A or B choices, A, B, C.
Yeah, I like
it's a great question.
Polls.
Sorry?
I like to do polls. So
Polls
I'll like
great.
start the stream with Warzone, and I'll also make a poll like, hey, what do you guys want to see next? And I'll throw in like Sims, Apex, a game that I like to play, and then have them choose.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. So listen, guys, thank you very much for coming. For those of y'all that are tuning in now, we're sorry, but we're kind of wrapping up our Facebook gaming on session on burnout. So I'm Dr. K. I'm a psychiatrist and one of the founders of Healthy Gamer, where we focus on mental health for the digital generation. Today, we've had an awesome conversation with Television, who's primarily an FPS and variety streamer, an awesome member of the Black Creators Program. We've also had Darkness 429, also known as Tim, who is also an FPS and variety streamer who y'all can learn about a little bit of work-life balance from if you guys are degen gamers at home. And they've been sharing their experience of kind of burnout and their journey of like learning how to be a healthy streamer. So thank you guys very much for coming. And I think we're going to move on to the next thing. So thanks a lot, Tel and Tim.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I can't tell if we're still streaming, but
I think we're off now.